Hello. Hello. My AV team is looking at me to see if I can speak loudly enough. Bonjour. Good morning. I've caught a few people's attention. That's good. Welcome. For those who weren't in the room earlier, or for those who were, I'm still Dr. Eileen Donovan-Wright, the Associate Dean of Research at the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie, and I am delighted to be here, to drive down, to see everyone, and to welcome you today to celebrate some of our important and groundbreaking research that's going on right here in New Brunswick. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Dalhousie University operates on the unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Bezgo-Dumaquati peoples. These sovereign nations hold inherent rights as the original peoples of these lands, and we each carry collective obligations under the Peace and Friendship Treaties. Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights in Canada. Breakthrough breakfasts are a special event for us. They are dedicated to celebrating groundbreaking research and medical innovation and a spirit of community that allows us to interact with our partners, our donors, our clinicians, our researchers across the regions. We do these in groups, and we've done a number in Halifax, and they're usually focused on a topic. But today we are really thinking about how we can show up here in New Brunswick and feature some incredible researchers that are here and that all of you know well. We're showcasing these researchers and their innovations as a way to show that there are key areas of medical and health research that need to be transformed and that we're constantly evolving. So we can make a difference here in Atlantic Canada, and we can make a difference by working together. I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude not only to everyone who showed up today that has a different part to play in this research ecosystem, but also to take a moment to acknowledge our very generous sponsors and partners who make events like this possible. First of all, our gold sponsor, Shanex. And Shanex has been a strong supporter of these breakthrough breakfasts ever since I've been involved. And they are a family-owned organization with a vision of leading the way to better living. And I think all of us have an interest in understanding this work and being part of making sure we all live our very best lives. Our silver sponsors, the Dalhousie's Department of Medicine, again, repeat sponsors of these events. And the Department of Medicine, as you can imagine, is dedicated to building a healthier tomorrow together through our commitment to excellence in quality care, research, and education. If we do our jobs right, maybe we'll give them less work to do so that they can stop working themselves quite as hard as they have to do right now. And to our bronze sponsors, Research New Brunswick, who support research and innovation for a thriving New Brunswick, Envision St. John, the region's lead economic development and visitor attraction agency, tasked with sustainably growing the economy and population, and the generosity of the New Brunswick Medical Society, who advances the interests of physicians and improves the healthcare system in New Brunswick for the benefit of all patients. As it happens, today's, by coincidence, I don't think it was by design, but it is today. Today is Giving Tuesday. And Giving Tuesday, for those who haven't heard of it before, is a global movement aimed at inspiring people to give back, especially as we head into a season that we think of as a gift-giving season. Donors have long been a fuel for some of the world's greatest medical and health breakthrough. And most of the teams that start research start with some form of donor funding so that they can then go on to be successful and attract more funding. It is an important seed or crystal that starts growth. At Dalhousie, donors are providing essential funding that enables our researchers to bring out exceptional teams together, including the trainees, the medical students, undergraduate students, people in our community, and then the more advanced researchers. Those donors are helping us access the important equipment that's essential to do work and to fund the actual research, which is getting more and more challenging and costly, that is, unfortunately, in Canada, still somewhat underfunded from a GDP perspective. We won't get into politics here this morning, but it would be nice to see growth and more investment in innovation and research. I personally hope, and I know that the whole team here with Advancement that has worked very hard to bring this event together, we hope that you feel inspired by today's presentations, and we invite you to join the Giving Tuesday movement by lending your support. I hope that you can continue to enjoy your breakfast, refill your breakfast, get up and move around if you want during our programs. And now I would like to turn this over. We're going to have a few speakers, and then I'm going to host some speakers, and I'm going to tell them that when they're getting the evil eye, their time is just about up. So I will be, as I'm approaching you slowly and with increasing menace, you will know that you're going to get short in time, because we want people to be here, enjoy the day, but then be finished in a timely manner so that we can go and each go back to our important work. So it's now my pleasure to invite the Senior Associate Dean of Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, Dr. Julie Copeland, to the stage to bring her greetings.
Thank you, Eileen. And good morning, everyone. It's so great to see so many of you joining us here this morning. As many of you likely know, it took the will and the generous support of many stakeholders to bring the vision of having a medical school here in New Brunswick to life 15 years ago. From the very beginning, they knew that they wanted to foster a robust research program within the medical school to serve the region by focusing on the healthcare issues most pressing to our population here in New Brunswick. And as you can imagine, this could only be accomplished with collaboration and partnerships across healthcare, government, and academic communities, but also because of the generous support of community donors. I am proud of what we've been able to build together and very excited for the future. It is a great time to be serving as a Senior Associate Dean for DMNB, and I think our future looks bright. I'd now like to invite a special guest, Mrs. Lynn Irving, to the stage to say a few words. As a leader in our community, a physiotherapist, and a consultant in disability management, Mrs. Irving has always been passionate about our community and helping people to live better and work better. She joined DMNB as the founding co-chair of our medical research fundraising efforts back in 2011, and she spearheaded a very successful campaign, including the establishment of the J.D. Irving Endowed Chair in Occupational Medicine, and raising over $15 million for medical research in New Brunswick. Mrs. Irving.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Copeland, and good morning, everyone. My remarks this morning are going to be very brief, but it is with a great sense of pride and satisfaction that I'm here today, celebrating the accomplished medical research community that has been established at Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, right here at home in St. John, New Brunswick. And as you all know, with the partnership between Dalhousie University, the Government of New Brunswick, the University of New Brunswick, and Horizon Health Network, the DMNB program was established. However, it was necessary to provide research facilities and opportunities for undergraduate medical students in order to meet the requirements for a fully accredited medical school. New Brunswick lagged behind the rest of the country in medical research facilities and funding, and we were determined to change that. We launched a capital fundraising campaign to raise $15 million, and the research program we have today has grown from that early start. New Brunswick has truly stepped up to take its place in medical research. We all know that investment in research, health research, has the potential to reap great rewards for New Brunswick by contributing to the building of healthy, smart communities in which talented people can be attracted, live, and work. We all play an important role in continuing to foster innovation and to grow our research excellence. What you will hear today is just a small glimpse of the innovative ways in which our researchers are breaking new ground to improve health outcomes for the people of New Brunswick and the world beyond. I'm grateful to have played a very small part, and I look forward to seeing what is to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Irving, and thank you, Dr. Copeland. So now, without further ado, today we have our esteemed lineup of DMMB researchers who will share their latest insights and research findings within the allotted time. So we have Dr. Paul Atkinson, Dr. Duncan Webster, PhD candidate Tori Nelson in the Department of Pharmacology, and Dr. Keith Brunt. First up, please join me in welcoming my friend and colleague, Dr. Paul Atkinson. Dr. Atkinson is the Assistant Dean of Research at Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, a professor in emergency medicine, a busy clinician, and the Chief Medical Consultant at WorkSafe NB. Today, he is presenting his latest research, Compassion in Medicine, the Science of Caring.
Thank you, Eileen. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm not sure, is my mic working? You can hear me? That's excellent. So thank you, Eileen. Thanks, everyone, for coming along this morning, getting out of bed, especially my son. He came. I think it's an early start for Jack, so welcome. Now I'm in trouble. I know I don't have much time, but I just want to reassure you the doors are still open at the back. It's a breakthrough breakfast, not a breakout breakfast, so you will be allowed to leave. So it is an honor to be here with all of you this morning. As mentioned, I have a particular role with research at DMNB as the Assistant Dean, and it's a real pleasure. I'm also a researcher in Emerge and a consultant in occupational medicine with WorkSafe. And I just thought before I jump straight into my research, we'll just briefly outline the research at the Faculty of Medicine from DAL here in New Brunswick. And so we have a council that's at the heart of our research structure, and it's supported by 3 groups focusing on discovery science, population health, and then clinical and educational research grouped together with dozens of researchers working across these groups. I think New Brunswick's the perfect scale for impact. It's small enough to innovate quickly, but large enough to matter. So let's focus in on the clinical research today, within which sits my field of emergency medicine. And the emergency medicine team is at the back. Welcome to them today. So let's zoom in on emergency medicine. Who has seen this recent show that's out now, I think, on CTV, if I'm not wrong? The Pit. I've been told by our lawyers not to say that it's a sequel to ER. Apparently that's a problem. But this moment from The Pit, this is the opening scene from The Pit. And I think it's an uncomfortable reality for those of us working in emergency care. Because we have an emergency care crisis. It's a crisis. It's not just a long wait, it's a crisis. People are dying because of long waits. People go because they've nowhere else to go, and there's no space to treat them. So it's a crisis for the system, for patients, but also for the staff who work there. So our previous research, and I'm going to throw a few papers in here and there, has explored what this systemic crisis means for patients, and it is not good. The team has also looked at the impact on staff, because it turns out clinicians are not, in fact, a renewable resource. Well, not easily anyway. Who knew? So recently we put out a paper, Can Emergency Medicine Be Saved? And this is not about the system, this is about the people. It's a question, can we keep going? And you might say, well, of course you can keep going. Well, let's just look at the data. 1/2 of emergency staff describe symptoms of burnout, score high on a burnout scale. And you might say, what's burnout? Burnout is whenever you lose that sense of caring. You're fatigued in all ways, mentally, physically, and you don't engage anymore. And half of people score high on this scale. There's a 3 to 7% attrition rate of emergency physicians every year. That's massive. That's way higher than any industry standard. And that's not retirement. And the ages at which emergency physicians are leaving, women are leaving at 44, men at 56. So there's a problem. So we've done a lot. We've looked, and I'm not going to go through all these papers, but some of the things we've looked at over the past few years in our research program is how do different coping strategies impact burnout? How do overnight shift patterns change as clinicians age? And how does training and how do interventions impact, and can that be reduced? And right now, we're just beginning a scoping review this very year with one of our RIM students here at Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, looking at how shift work impacts health in general, including cardiovascular risk. But this morning, I want us to focus in on something that I think can help us move forward. We're not here to just talk about the problems, we want solutions. And so we're here to talk about compassion. So 3 years ago, a short editorial that we wrote seemed to kind of go viral and struck a nerve. If ABBA has a greatest hits album, and at the top of that is Dancing Queen, well, I think this series would be our Dancing Queen. It was viewed and shared 50,000 times, and the question was, if we do less, would that be more for emergency medicine? But that's a conversation for another day, because it led through to a 3-part series, and the last of these was this paper on compassion, saving emergency medicine through compassion. So similar to Maslow's hierarchy of social needs, I believe that any health system has a hierarchy. And in this, we need 3 basic things. We need the resources to do our job. They have to be there. We need training to do our job, but that's not enough. On top of that, we need to maintain and grow our compassion for what we're doing for our patients. Because a lot of this we as individuals can't change. At the bottom, we can advocate, the system can do this, but at the top, we can actually do this ourselves. What is compassion, if you're sitting wondering this morning? It's a bit early for this. Let's just give you a definition from the Dalai Lama. Compassion is an openness to the suffering of others, but with a commitment to relieve it. So it's 2 parts. It's really about recognizing and acting. It's not just about feeling. Let's have a look at 3 different patients that we have a question. Does caring matter in medicine? Or is it just the biological science? You're going to hear a lot about biological science this morning, and I believe strongly in it. But I believe that it's part of a bigger concept about caring. So a 34-year-old unhoused male presents in early winter, let's say today, it's cold, with frostbite to both feet. What will actually lead to him doing well? Is it the science of the rewarming and the analgesia? Or is it the caring to make sure he has somewhere to go so that he doesn't suffer this again tomorrow? A 60-year-old paramedic reports she cannot face work since she performed CPR on a drowning child last fall. This is all too real. We have high rates of people out with traumatic psychological injury from first responders. But what will help her? Is it going to be medications, or is it going to be listening? Is it both? A 69-year-old female reports she's been having dizzy spells. Is it the ECG, the Holter monitor, the EEG that will get her to the age of 79, or is it the caring to put in a safe environment around her so if she falls, she has someone to call? You know, this isn't philosophy, it's physiology. Our psyche impacts the body. Well, we're not separate, we're not Cartesian beings, really. And broken heart syndrome isn't just poetic, it's actually a fatal condition, also known as Takotsubo syndrome. It's real. Bad feelings have negative physiological impacts, but the corollary is also true. So let's look at that. What about the positive impact on health? Well, Compassionomics is a major, long, 300-page systematic review of the literature that I don't expect you to pick up and read unless it's in the evening to help you sleep. Some of us need something to do that. But at the core of it is this message that compassion has a positive impact on any industry, whether you're in logging, in oil, in healthcare, in recovery, in workers' compensation. Compassion will improve your business economics. It's not just a nice thing. But let's remind ourselves what it is again. Sympathy is when you understand. Empathy is when you feel bad for someone. Compassion is when you turn that into action. And that's what we're talking about. It's not just empathy and sympathy. So the data points towards this being something that's important. It's important for patients because it improves clinical outcomes when they are in a compassionate environment. It improves the systems, reducing costs, supporting financial sustainability. It helps the professionals. It lowers burnout when they're in a compassionate environment. And what does it take? About 40 seconds per interaction is what the science says of focused, compassionate thought and action. You might say, really? Well, you can read this book. I will never get up on stage and say something that doesn't have a reference. And so the reference is here that patient benefits from compassion include improved wound healing. Really? Yes. Better cardiovascular and autonomic function with lower inflammatory markers. Reduced patient pain and lower need for painkillers, and that's a problem. And higher adherence to the treatment plans that patients are given. What about the system? Compassion helps the system with reduced cost and backlog, fewer visits to specialists. So if you're a specialist, maybe you don't want this, but maybe you have enough. So for the system, it decreases referrals. It decreases over-testing when you have a compassionate approach. And it improves our well-being as clinicians. And this isn't all just, again, mumbo-jumbo or some nice sort of progressive thought this morning at breakfast. This is based in neuroscience. This is measurable. Neuroscience shows through various tests, and I won't get into that now, but basically through functional MRI and other testing, we can show that the application of compassion activates positive brain pathways, reward centers, releases positive hormones, as opposed to empathy, which you would think, well, that's neutral. It's not. Empathy without compassion is negative. So if you're feeling bad for someone else, you walk down the street, you see a homeless person, and you don't do something about it, you get a negative release of cortisol. It's not good for you. But when you act, you get a positive release of hormones and you activate your reward center. So this is what we're talking about. It's that little voice in your head that wants you to help, but when you shut it down, it's actually bad for your health as well as the person not receiving any benefit. And you might think, well, what about survival of the fittest? Isn't that how we all got here, to be Homo sapiens at the pinnacle of society and history? And I'm nearly done, Eileen. But Charles Darwin never said survival of the fittest. And in fact, if you look at this, even at a cellular level, cells that can get together and create an immune system survive and thrive. And as humans, evolution showed that communities who work together to support each other support the weakest survived and thrived. It wasn't the individual survival of the fittest. So there we are. We think that caring for others and looking after ourselves are opposites, but they're not. And on this, you can see where you want to be as a successful giver. And that means you give to others with your time and effort and compassion, and you give to yourself. Self-compassion is key. The failed givers are the burnouts. And of course, you don't want to be apathetic in this bottom corner. So spend your time wisely. Listen to people. Care for people. Don't rush through, apart from talks at a breakfast. Don't rush your interaction with your patients or your clients. Take a little time. Sit down. Don't stand over people. So sit down, get to people's level, and listen to what they have to say to you if you're a clinician. And don't rush out of the room until you're sure you've asked them, did I hear what you had to say today? So there we are. Our research program continues to focus on compassion. We're continuing to look at whether compassion can make a real difference, not just a theoretical difference, not just on brain scans, but actually in outcomes. It's about the people. So I'll finish with this. To quote a great Canadian band, if I had $1 million, we would run Canada's first prospective study of compassion and psychological safety intervention in medicine, looking at clinician and patient well-being. So, compassion may be our most powerful tool that we have to make our medical system sustainable again. That's why we should care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atkinson, and thank you for the gift of that talk. I think most of us will remember that, and that's a good way to start sharing on Giving Tuesday. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Webster to the stage. Dr. Duncan Webster is an associate professor, infectious disease at DMNB. Dr. Webster has clinical and research interests relating to chronic viral infections, including hepatitis C, as well as harm reduction, tuberculosis, zoonotic infections, and glycosylation. Dr. Webster.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, mic's working okay? Great, thank you. So thanks very much. It's an honor to be here today. And there's mention of the gift of Paul's talk, which works nicely into the talk I want to give today, because I want to talk about gifts and I want to talk about relationships and how that impacts research and how that in turn fuels us. I want to start by talking about the relationships that we have. As already mentioned, we are all treaty people and we live on treaty land. And so it's an honor to live, work, and play on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey. And I do spend a lot of my time professionally doing research. As mentioned, I do a lot of research in bloodborne pathogens like HIV, Hep B, Hep C, harm reduction, as well as zoonotic diseases, tick-borne illness. But what I want to focus on a bit today is some of the research that I do around mycobacteria and tuberculosis. And I guess I would say that it's amazing that it does actually take up as much time as it does for me, which is a good thing because I enjoy it. But I'm going to drop back first to kind of give kind of a weaving thread of a story and try to end up back towards the beginning again. So this is a picture of myself with Hudson Freeze. So for those of you who don't know Hud Freeze, you actually are impacted by him. I have no doubt each and every one of us will be familiar with some of the work that he's done. This is, I first met Hud Freeze in 2008 in 2011 in at a conference in Leuven, Belgium. And this is a picture taken in 2018 at Hud's lab in just outside of San Diego. So he works at Sanford Burnham Prebys Scientific Discovery Institute. And Hud is a living legend, truly. And his work which led to the discovery of this particular molecule. it doesn't show up there, but this is a polymerase, which I'm going to talk about, and it impacts a lot of the work that we all do, including the work that I do with tuberculosis and beyond. So HUD's story actually goes back to 1966. So in 1966, Hud Fries was a graduate student at the University of Indiana, and he was tasked with going to Yellowstone National Park. He avoided bears and the traffic jams that they caused and spent a lot of time at the hot springs. So this is Mushroom Spring. And in this boiling pool of an environment, he was able to culture a bacteria. So you can see in the image there, when he was able to culture this bacteria and he looked under the microscope, he was the first human to ever see this bacteria that would change our lives. That bacteria is Thermus aquaticus. So it lives at these incredible temperatures, and a particular enzyme that it produces is a polymerase, a DNA polymerase, which is Taq polymerase. And so anybody who knows of PCR will be familiar with Taq polymerase. And so his discovery absolutely revolutionized science and medicine and our day-to-day lives. So how did it influence our day-to-day lives? Well, people will be familiar with this picture of this swab. You'll remember back in COVID, right? We all had the point-of-care tests that we could do at home, but sometimes we wanted that really precise PCR swab. PCR could not have happened without Hud Fries and the discovery that he made. PCR is a really amazing process, which I won't go into detail, but I'll just say this. Imagine if you had $1, and every day you doubled that. So $1 became $2, $2 became $4, 4 became 8, 8 became 16. And you do that for a month, for 30 days. At the end of that 30 days, you would have over $1 billion. It's crazy, but it's true. Do the math. And it's the same process with the Taq polymerase and PCR. We're able to take a single strand of DNA, replicate it, do that doubling 30 times, and you've got over 1 billion copies of that DNA strand. And that's what makes PCR work. That's the magic of PCR. It influenced us not only through COVID, but there's not a lab on the planet that isn't doing PCR in some shape or form. I think that's pretty fair to say. And certainly in the lab that I work in our clinical diagnostics lab at the St. John Regional Hospital, I'm using this every day, and in the TB work that we're doing, we use PCR every day. So TB, as I mentioned, is a lot of the work that I do, mycobacteria and tuberculosis. I'm not going to go into detail, but I could talk for days about the different research that we've done around TB, epidemiological, diagnostics, therapeutics, but the therapeutics part is a big part of TB work now. Multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is a plague. It's amazing, even in 2025, 25% of the global population has TB, which is incredible. And in 2025, the #1 killer of humans from infection was due to tuberculosis. So it's absolutely relevant. And we do see rates rising in Canada. But I want to hone in on one small part of tuberculosis, one very small little piece. So those little green circles, each one of those, so this represents the cell wall of mycobacteria, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And there are many things that make TB very special. The cell wall is one of the biggest components of TB. When we look at that cell wall, you'll notice that there's those little green circles that join together and make those long strands. So each of those green circles represents a mannose molecule. It's a sugar, simple mannose. And there's an intricate enzymatic pathway that leads to the building of those mannose strands. And the enzyme that builds those mannose strands is called an alpha-1,2 mannosyltransferase, which you can see an example of on the left side of the screen. That alpha-1,2 mannosyltransferase is a really special enzyme. It's special in the TB bacteria, but it's also special in the human cell. The human cell is much more complex than a bacterial cell. So with a human cell, you've got a nucleus in the middle with the chromosomes, but then you've got this network outside of the nucleus called an ER, or an endoplasmic reticulum. And this is where proteins are synthesized. And not only are the proteins synthesized, but they're decorated with sugars. And those sugars, they impact how the protein folds, which in turn impacts its structure, which in turn impacts its function. So if there's something not quite right with those sugars, then there's a problem for the cell. Every cell needs to make those proteins just right. And I have a very, very deep respect for that alpha-1,2 mannose and what it does with the packaging of those proteins, because it can influence us at a very human level as well. So this is my daughter, Maria. Maria was diagnosed with an illness when she was less than a year old. And her illness was due to a defect in that very same enzyme, that alpha-1,2 mannose. So I came to really respect this enzyme. What I want this slide to remind me, though, is to say thank you. When my daughter was born and diagnosed, and then years later, my father, Dr. Russell Webster, helped to develop a foundation called Foundation Glycosylation, the FOG, and implemented it within the St. John Regional Hospital Foundation. And there were a lot of people here who helped. Barry Strack, I remember, helped me to work and to establish this. And he was the one who said, go talk to the St. John Regional Hospital Foundation. So thank you. But thank you to so many people here, because when the call came out to ask for help, because what was needed was there was an illness with no treatment. We needed research. Business community, medical community, great colleagues, local researchers, philanthropists. The outpouring of gifts was incredible. So I mentioned how I wanted to speak about gifts. There's so many gifts that we get, and we get these from research. That Taq polymerase that Hud Friese helped to discover, that was such a gift. He didn't know that that's where it was leading, but that's where it led. Same thing when we do basic science research, we may have a goal in mind, but it doesn't always lead us to where we think we're going to get, or it might, but it might also lead us to other places too. So thank you. Thank you for supporting basic science research. Coming back to that glycosylation pathway. So within the endoplasmic reticulum, where those proteins are being formed, there's these sugar trees that are being built. So there's a couple points in here where that alpha-1,2 mannose is really critical. And if it doesn't act properly, there's a problem. So in looking closely at that, again, somewhere in here, I know there's a gift. And somewhere in here, I know there's probably many gifts. So I mentioned how I had visited Hud Friese's lab back in 2018. And we continue to work with Hud Friese. So even as recently as November of 2025, which was yesterday, the DMMB Research Lab continues actually to work with Hud Friese. And we had sent some cells to Hud's lab to help further his research as he looks into what gifts lie within this mysterious process. The other thing I will mention, though, very quickly as I finish up is that when you do basic science research, it can lead in a lot of different directions. And so one of the things that Hud Friese sees with this is that one of the answers is to build up levels of mannose within the cell to try to push things through a faulty pathway. And there's ways to do this. There's two enzymes that are focused on and that we were happy to help to support Hud in this research. So there's a GMPPA and a GMPPB enzyme that work together. And if you can block the GMPPA, you can increase the amounts of mannose. And in doing that, not only impacts glycosylation, not only impacts perhaps a way to cause problems for the mycobacterial cell wall, but it also even has impacts for breast cancer and breast cancer treatment and for triple negative breast cancer. So again, it spills out the gifts. And so I want to end there and say thank you very much to all of you for supporting this. Thank you for supporting basic science research and the DMMB Research Lab. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Webster. So please help me now in welcoming almost doctor, Tori Nelson to the stage. Tori Nelson is a PhD candidate, which means she's working towards in more senior part of her PhD candidacy in the Department of Pharmacology, and she works with Dr. Keith Brunt on his research team. Tori is presenting her research focused on advancing our understanding of heart failure progression and the protective mechanisms of guideline-directed medical therapies, ultimately informing the development of novel therapies to prevent and delay the onset of cardiac disease. So, Tori.
Do I just hit the green? Okay. Yes, I promise I'll stay on her time. I might even stop just before you come to the stairs. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here to speak this morning. And I'm really honored to be here to share some of my research that's ongoing at this time. So when I was thinking about this talk, and every time I'm invited to speak, I'm always reflecting on my research. I find sometimes we get so busy in what we're doing that we forget why we're doing it. Even at my age, I find myself already forgetting to remember this. And so for me, my why started many years ago. At the age of 10, my father, who was healthy, ate well, exercised, and took good care of himself, suddenly passed as a result of cardiovascular disease. Years later, I found myself back in the cardiac ICU next to my mom, who was recovering from a heart attack. And so I couldn't understand how two people who were healthy on the outside, took care of themselves, had these silent diseases on the inside. And how can one survive and one pass away? And so these questions led me to what I study today. So what I study are things that are hidden, things that we can't see on the outside, and ways that we may be able to detect them early, and that we could treat them before they progress in the long term. And so today, thousands of Canadians, especially our older populations in Atlantic Canada, are suffering from diastolic dysfunction. Diastolic dysfunction is the underlying feature of many different cardiovascular diseases, and it's essentially the inability for the heart to relax properly. And what happens is the heart becomes so stiff and inflamed, and so much cellular stress is occurring, that it doesn't have the time to relax properly. It's quiet, it's slow, it doesn't have the sudden chest pain that you would see with a heart attack. It's a gradual disease. But it's one of the fastest growing problems in Canada, yet we often diagnose it late. We don't have early detection biomarkers, and we also have limited treatment options. And so this is where my research fits in. Diastolic dysfunction is not just about the stiffness of the heart, but it's why does it become stiff in the first place? And so we found that not only is it a mechanical problem, but between the contraction and the relaxation, it may actually be a communication problem, and specifically the communication between two major cell types in the context of my work. But the first being the macrophage. A macrophage is the type of immune cell that's in our body, and it protects us against pathogens, infections throughout our life. The second cell type we have is a cardiomyocyte. Cardiomyocyte being a fancy word for cardiac cell, or the cells that make up our heart. And so what happens in the context of diastolic dysfunction is that within our macrophage itself, we have inflammation, which, yes, inflammation in the context of pathogens and infections is a good thing. However, as we age, what happens is this inflammation becomes dysfunctional and chronic. And then in our cardiomyocyte, we get what's known as ER stress. And as Dr. Duncan Webster already mentioned, ER stands for endoplasmic reticulum. And if you remember back to maybe high school biology for some, you'll remember that this is where the proteins are folded and where proteins are produced. And so what happens in diastolic dysfunction is that these misfolded proteins actually build up, and this is what leads to the stiffness within these cardiac cells. And so in DD, or diastolic dysfunction, what happens is that we have these two cell types that are now connecting. So the chronic inflammation that's happening within our macrophage is actually driving this ER stress that we see in our cardiomyocytes, which then in fact is causing more inflammation. And so what happens is this becomes a continuous cycle. So what we're looking to do is determine where we can intervene in this cycle to stop this continuous cycle from ongoing. And so of a target recently, a therapeutic drug is the SGLT2 inhibitors. They were originally created actually for the treatment of diabetes, but in the clinical trials for diabetes, we actually found that patients that had diastolic dysfunction had improved outcomes after the clinical trials, independent of whether or not they had diabetes. And so what we asked is, could these SGLT2 inhibitors be either inhibiting the inflammation within our macrophages, or could it be inhibiting this ER stress within our cardiomyocyte? And what we found is that actually these are really effective at both blocking the inflammation in our macrophage and also by inhibiting this ER stress in our cardiomyocyte. So at the cell level, we're able to actually model this inflammation in our macrophages and also model our ER stress to better understand the mechanisms that are driving this continuous cycle. But what does this mean for patient populations? So by better understanding these mechanisms that are actually driving this pathway, could we stop this cycle? Could we also identify early biomarkers that we could detect diastolic dysfunction before it progresses to late stage? Additionally, could we better understand how SGLT2 inhibitors function? Because currently they're prescribed and they've actually become guideline therapy for diastolic dysfunction, which is lovely because, as I mentioned, there's limited options previously. However, the mechanisms by which it's being protective in diastolic dysfunction are less understood. So my project aims to understand the mechanisms by which this actually may be inhibiting this inflammation and this ER stress, and how we may be able to actually improve these drugs to actually target either one specific cell type at a time or both. Additionally, by better understanding these mechanisms, we also may be able to identify new targets, new pathways that we can examine to better treat our patients with diastolic dysfunction. So the biggest take-home message for today is that I want you to understand that we don't have to accept that aging hearts have to fail. Inflammation doesn't happen suddenly, and stiffness doesn't happen overnight. Cellular stress takes time to build, and this allows us to have time to intervene early for these patients. And we can do this by understanding these mechanisms. We can do three major things for our patients. We can start to detect diastolic dysfunction sooner. We can start to treat it smarter. And we can also change the trajectory of aging heart disease in Canada and in the world. And that's it for my talk today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tori. Gold star for the timing. Our final speaker today is Dr. Keith Brunt. Dr. Keith Brunt is an associate professor in the Department of Pharmacology, and he is presenting his latest research to help us live healthy and happy to 100. I'm hoping it's longer than that, Keith, actually. By understanding the building blocks of aging well and translating innovation to practices that transform the patient experience. And I will remind our audience that there's still coffee and breakfast if you want to go out and get more, but also that after Dr. Brunt's talk, we'll get all the speakers up here, so if you have a question, you'll have a chance to ask it, okay? So welcome, Dr. Brunt.
Thanks. I see that Tora gave me an extra 3 minutes. I hope I don't have to consume them. No, just kidding. That was a test. So I specialize in something called translational medicine. And often when I talk about translational science, the first question I get in New Brunswick is, oh, that's really cool. You translate French to English in the textbooks. And then I have to explain what it actually is, which is communicating in about 4 different kinds of languages. One is, of course, medicine. One's engineering. One's business. And one's government. And sometimes when I try to explain all the things that are going on in the lab, things can get a little dicey. But when I explain it to an AI, no problem. It figures it all out, and it gives me this. So apparently this is AI's representation of what I do with my team. It's actually quite beautiful, and it reminds me that, you know, I've actually been doing this for 13 years and 5 months here at the DMNB. And it was 13 years ago that I sat at your house, Lynn, while you were on the staircase talking about the opening of the DMNB. And I looked over to my wife and I said, we're going to have to be here for at least 5 years because it's going to take this long to get those first classes out. Now, those first classes of medical students have been graduating every year since I've been here. There's a little over 365 graduates. There's been 6 PhD graduates. And what's really cool is over the next 4 years, we're going to hit 500 MDs and 10 PhD students. And I think that's going to have a lot of impact. So in those 13 years and 5 months, There is so much I want to tell you. I want to tell you that we found a growth factor called GDF15 that goes up in our cardiac patients and tells us that they're going to have a bad outcome. They're going to be rehospitalized and come back. We found a protein called irisin that's an exercise myokine. You know all about it. And what happens with that is it protects the heart. But in our cardiac surgical patients, it's at about 25%, the normal levels at best, and nearly zero in some of them. Can we raise it? Does that explain why we have exercise intolerance in half our patients when we send them to cardiac rehab? We're going to find out. The GDF15, we have a new molecule, a new clinical trial coming. We hope to be a part of it. When we look at things like variants, genetic variants in the genome, we found that this hormone that's supposed to regulate our blood actually also contributes to female-only hypertension. Why? Cardiac ALAS1 switching, two enzymes that make heme that help keep our heart functioning, led us to a discovery of a new molecule that we can give to the heart 5 days after an infarct and improve cardiac function. This is an entirely new class of molecule. I want to tell you about the engineered nanotech that we've been doing. The nanochemotherapy that we built, because we understood that breast cancer is starved for folate. So we wrapped up 2 chemotherapies in a bunch of nanoparticles made out of folate, and we fed it to them. And they went right inside the cells and destroyed them. 1,000 times more potent. And what that means is no more hair falling out, no more sickness from the chemo. We shouldn't fear the treatment as much as the disease. I could tell you about the nanovaccine that we built for melanoma in the same way, because when cardiac surgeons remove tumors, some of those cells can escape, and we need to prevent them and trigger the immune system to go find them and take them out. I want to tackle you about nano-natural products that we're deriving from food and spices for the sole purpose of protecting people from radiation and why that matters to astronauts and people getting radio-oncology. I want to tell you about the nanosurs, the chemical fingerprinting that we've been doing to try to find out unbiased ways of detecting disease and reassuring patients that their cancer is not coming back yet, and reassuring physicians that if it does, we caught it early and we can treat it quickly. So much I want to tell you. I want to tell you about the artificial intelligence models we're building right now. Echo AI, echocardiography to detect diastolic dysfunction. Burnout AI to find the physiological consequences of when somebody is going through burnout so we can get ahead of it, because if you simply ask somebody, are you burnt out, they might not tell you. I want to tell you about sepsis AI, because it's a frustration that people came to me from the ER and OR, and they said, can you help us? We can't find these patients fast enough in order to treat them. But if we can stop people from losing their limbs or their life. I want to tell you about the frailty AI and the nurses who are so busy, they don't have more time to fill out charts. And as useful as frailty is, fundamentally, we need to automate that system. And thankfully, we found a chart-based way to do that, and now we can set up an automatic system to detect it on the floors and report it in the charts, so we don't have to bother our nurses with it. I want to tell you about the aging heart, about Tori's project a little bit, but I won't rehash it because she did such a good job. But I will tell you about ovaries and how important they are, because we know that women are protected from these diseases right up until the moment that they hit pre- and perimenopause and things go out of control. And what's interesting is ovarian cancer is one of those hardest cancers to detect, and we detect it so late in stage 3 and 4 that we can't have an effective way of treating it. And for nearly 40% of women, that's mortal. But what we found is that in stage 1 and 2, the earliest stages before the cancer has even left the ovaries, their hearts stiffen. So we can detect new ways. We can develop new ways to find this. We also translated this to other cancers. We found it in pancreatic cancer, another cancer that comes too late for us to be effective at treating it. The hearts stiffen. We know that cancer and aging have these common things of unfolded proteins called amyloids that float around. We also know that those amyloids get into our brains in Alzheimer's. And we know that there's a case of ATTR in our population right now. 50% of them get misdiagnosed. For 6 years, they live with this disease, their heart's getting worse, and what are we going to be able to do about it? Less than 1% are currently being diagnosed properly. But I want to tell you who is doing this work, because it's not me. I just mostly fill out emails all day long. It's the 105 people over the last 13 years and 5 months who are highly qualified personnel, undergrads, high school students, postdoctoral fellows, and research associates. They've been doing this work with me. And I want to tell you about the industries that we've brought to New Brunswick, we've created in New Brunswick, that have brought industry sponsorship and commercialization, who drive these things forward. Maybe some of those companies you might recognize because we worked in that virtual care space during the pandemic. But I want to tell you also how. How does translational science actually work? And it comes down to these 4 fundamental things. Because as cool as these ideas are, we have to meet these goals. We have to improve health outcomes. We have to lower the costs relative to the current standard of care. We have to have a better patient experience, and we must improve the provider satisfaction, the physicians, the nurses, the physical rehab therapists, the pharmacists, everyone in the circle of care that's caring for our patients. And so we have to have partnerships. We have to have goals with people. We have to work with our health authorities. We have to work with our university. We have to develop novel ways to get people to talk across traditional boundaries, because we can't say industry is responsible for this and the university is responsible for that and not talk to each other. So we have to work with the government. The government has a responsibility to utilize resources appropriately. We can't put money into everything in an unlimited way. We have to be responsible. But that means we have to be innovative for them, so that we can do things and prevent diseases so they don't have to pay the costly stroke and the costly MI if we can prevent it from happening in the first place. And we got to make sure that the physicians who understand this are also happy doing their job. And so when we added AI Scribe, my doctor said to me, I think I can do this for another 10 years. Those are the changes that we need. So when we think about these 4 aims, we can ask fundamental questions and know that we're making progress every year. How does a heart stiffen? Why hasn't medicine digitized yet? How might we prevent the disease? And why do we need to change? So Tori mentioned the why for her. We all have a why. The why for me has been my friends that I've lost. The why for you are the people that you love and care about, that we're trying to help. So it's easy to understand why looking at pictures like this, and why I'm passionate to stand with you today and tell you the things I want to tell you. Frustration in healthcare are opportunities for research questions to be created. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brandt. And just one more round of applause for all our presenters, so thank you. I'd now like to invite all of our presenters back to the stage, please, and take a seat in one of these lovely comfy chairs. So this will start our Q&A session, and it's an opportunity for any of you that have questions to raise your hand. We've got microphones. Come on in. Come on in. So as our speakers return to the stage, I'd like to draw your attention to a few things. First, you can check out the Remedy magazine that's provided for you. There's one for each chair, and there's more available in the room. It features stories about medical and health research and education across Dalhousie's medical campuses. If you would like to receive one in the mail, please let one of the advancement staff know, and maybe the advancement staff could just raise their hand and kind of just wave a hand. We'll find you if you have any questions. And I'm just looking around the room now to see, does anyone have any questions? Who's brave enough to start? Well, I'm going to ask a question then to start. And I'm going to actually ask Tori, as as a graduate student here in New Brunswick, how much has the donor support meant to you as a graduate student? Where do you see it? How does it impact you?
Yeah, That's a really great question, because we wouldn't be able to sustain what we do without, the support of all of our donors. So for us, it, can be so many different things. It can be actually the research in the lab, also creating spaces for us. So to be able to have something outside of research, it does consume a lot of our time. And it's great that we're able to have that support, in the lab, but it's also really important to have that outside. So I think, being able to balance both of those is really, really important with the support of our donors. So we're very appreciative of all that you do for us.
Thank you. Thanks, Tori. Anyone else have a question about the research?
There's one.
Please, Barry. Dr. Sack.
For Keith, we're really interested in ovarian cancer, and you're absolutely right. It's detected very, very late, too late for many. You mentioned stiffening of the heart. How far away are we? First, how do you measure stiffening of the heart, and how far away do you think we are from using that as a tool to screen people?
It's always tough to ask me a futuristic question because I'm an eternal optimist, so I want to say, we can do it tomorrow. In industry, we often get the question, what can you do with $1 million? What can you do with 100? And oftentimes that's a question of what's really pragmatic. So how soon can we do it? Well, that's resource dependent, so that's a money question. How do we do it? How do we measure the stiffening of the heart? There's a definitive way we do it, which is hemodynamically with a catheter right in the heart. But non-invasively, the best way for us right now is echocardiography. And that's why we're augmenting currently within the Heart Center an Echo AI program. Dr. Mikhail Pour has recently joined us. She's an expert in cardiology and echocardiography. Dr. Ernest Namdar joined us as an AI engineer in my program. And so we're actively building this capacity right now. Screening, we do thousands, maybe tens of thousands of echoes in the province. It's very accessible in all the hospitals in all the cities. So if we can overlay the AI algorithm on that, we can start screening right away. Symptoms are really prevalent and simple. It's a shortness of breath doing normal exertions. So if you're ever short of breath, and we tend to think that, oh, I'm just out of shape. You shouldn't be out of shape getting out of bed. You shouldn't be out of shape having a shower. These are activities of daily living, and so when we see those, so we can start screening right away. And a good family history of ovarian cancer or cancers in the family, coupled with shortness of breath, is a good differential to start screening. So these tools are rapidly ready to be deployed within the hospital.
Thank you very much, Keith. Dr. Brunt, sorry. I think you could also do it by walking up the street from the harbor up to the Delta in a pair of high heels early in the morning in a hurry to detect that as well, just from your city. Got a natural diagnosis there. Anyone else there? Anyone else have a question, please?
Can you all hear me? Yes. Thank you for the Ireson shout out. It's nice to see it outside of my PhD documents somewhere else. I really enjoyed Dr. Brunt's slide at the end about having everyone work together, bringing in industry, the RHAs, and the government, and what, in your opinion, Dr. Brunt, and I'm also interested in everyone else as well, is the key characteristic to be able for everyone to work together in a effective way?
Listening and letting other people speak, like Dr. Webster, who knows all about this very well. I'm going to call him out. But you have to communicate effectively, right? You have to get out there, you have to show people, you have to understand what's people's motivations. So in the Faculty of Business, when I give talks, it's the business of medicine. And one of the things that I talk about is you have to understand the motivation of the people in their roles and understand that their motivations are not your motivations necessarily. So somebody in government has a different rule book to follow than somebody in academia. And industry has different goals than a clinician. Clinicians want to take care of patients. Industry needs to make money. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's just the reality. And so when you talk about how translation works, sorry about that. These are some of the challenges, and these are the ways you have to fundamentally do that. The best way to do that is to build a broad team with that different expertise in the team embedded.
I might just I'm not sure if my mic's on or not.
We'll make it
I might just jump in as well from my role as the Assistant Dean at DMNB or DalMed, New Brunswick, because, and I want to tie it back to, I didn't speak about cells. I mentioned them once. Everyone else spoke about cells. Because I'm an emergency physician, I deal with the whole person, but we're made up from cells, and maybe we don't like to think about that what we are is just a bunch of cells. And within those cells, there's lots more going on. And I touched upon this, but didn't really have time to go further. But if we think back to where we all began millions of years ago, it goes to your question. How did those cells turn into us? They did it by making connections with other cells, with becoming part of a greater whole of eventually they didn't recognize themselves as a unicellular organism, but they became multicellular, and then they became an organ, and then they became part of a human, that here we are, we sit and we try to change those cells. So they evolved their own ability to change themselves so they live longer and better and healthier. So what's the lesson for us? It's nice to be here and have a DAL logo up here. It's really lovely to see it in New Brunswick, and I'm really proud of it. But it's not the purpose. It's part of the greater organism, the greater desire to improve healthcare, to improve science. And in New Brunswick, we got lots of everything. We got 2 or 3 of everything. We have 2 types of school bus. We have, I'm going to, so we're always having a couple of different things going on. But what's important is that we don't allow those barriers to become true barriers to progress, that we overcome them, that yes, we can wave our flag, but we're also proud to stand beside someone else who's waving their flag and wave a shared flag from time to time. So we need to build these connections, work together. I want to give shout out to Research NB as one of those organizations that does that. I truly believe that they will help us all see the shared future, and that there's lots of stuff happening and that we don't have time to talk about, but things are starting to come together. So I have hope, to answer your question, that great folks like the people sitting beside me, who all probably identify slightly differently in terms of what flag they wave, will soon continue, I should say, that's already beginning, to work more closely together for a common purpose. So that sounds a little bit, I don't know, maybe sounds a little soft, but I actually think it's the key to what we need to do. So thank you for your question.
Yeah, and I'll jump onto that too, if that's okay. Just to kind of reiterate what Paul has said, I think it comes down to relationships, which is, again, one of the things I was trying to put forward in my talk. It is about relationships, whether it's cellular relationships or community relationships. And I find medicine is a team sport. So like any team, you've got different positions, people with different strengths and skills and different knowledge and understanding. And when you have a common goal, you come together. So forming those relationships so that you can have that team.
Thank you very much. I see a question at the back. Thank you.
This is for Duncan Torrey. Thank you to everybody who presented. How do you share the things that you are passionate about to people who aren't in this room, who are obviously engaged, like things that you can't see at a microbiological or a biochemical level? How do you share that passion?
Okay. Sorry, it was for me. Sorry.
Both of you guys.
No,
yeah.
that's okay. Yeah, that's a really great question, because I feel like a lot of what happens is that, we explore these options and these pathways, but sharing it to other people of what we do and the importance of what we do is kind of usually behind closed doors. But I've really tried throughout all of my academic career to put that kind of at the forefront, because I think it's really important for people to understand what we do and the importance behind that. So for me and myself, actually, I've been a part of Impart, which is like an online organization that essentially creates collaboration between different universities and different researchers. And in my role in Impart, I actually was doing scientific communication. So it was taking, the stuff that we do every day that's pretty complex and deep into detail, but making it into a way that everyone everyone can understand what's happening, what we're studying, and why it's so important. And I think that those roles are just as important as the research that we do, because if people don't understand what we're doing or why we do it, then we're not going to be able to continue to be doing that. And so scientific education is also a really big passion of mine and something that I really try to advocate for and share, both in a teaching role and understanding the importance of what we do, or just even in my community when I go to another event and I share what I do and why I'm passionate about it and the importance of it. And I think it just creates, again, a conversation or a connection about research and its importance. And so I think that is key for doing all of this research and the purpose that's behind it. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm just looking at my watch to make sure we stay on time. Catherine, please.
This is a question for Dr. Webster. You mentioned that 50% of the population has tuberculosis or carries tuberculosis. Is that correct?
25%.
25%.
Yep.
Sorry, wasn't quite listening. I was surprised by that. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your research, what's the next step in your research and how we're addressing that issue? You said even in Canada we're seeing some rises in tuberculosis, and I just was surprised by that, so I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Sure, thanks for that, because that is a surprising statistic. You think 1 in 4 people globally has tuberculosis. How can that be? And it's the natural history of tuberculosis. So when people are exposed to mycobacterium tuberculosis, it's almost across the board airborne and inhaled into the lungs. But when you are exposed to that, a healthy immune system contains that bacteria. So it's sleeping inside of us. So we call it latent TB infection. Sleeping tuberculosis is a term I'll often use when counseling patients. So that 25% of people, it's not that they're walking around with active tuberculosis disease, but it's sitting inside of them, and for about 10% of people, it will wake up and become active. So it's not that 25% of the global population are sick with tuberculosis, but the potential is there. So in terms of next steps, I wouldn't say there's one single next step, like I'm heading in this direction. I'd say there's a whole host of things happening at the same time. So everything from, the epidemiology, tracking, like knowing what's going on so that we can be prepared, try to prevent issues. So the epidemiology is a really big piece, tracking our, local rates from a local, provincial, national, and international perspective. There's actually TB elimination strategies through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the World Health Organization. So we see what we're doing as sort of under a broader umbrella, like we're one small member of a great big team, and we're on goal to TB elimination so that we can reduce this and eliminate it as a public health issue globally, by 2050. So there's the epidemiology part. The diagnostics is really critical. It's incredible that up until, I'll say 25 years ago, our diagnostics for tuberculosis had not really changed over a century. And so now with new testing, like there's a diagnostic assay we've brought into our lab called the interferon gamma release assay, where we can more precisely identify those people who have that sleeping tuberculosis so that we can then offer preventative treatment to reduce the risk for it developing into active TB disease down the road. So there's the diagnostic part. There's the therapeutics part as well. I mentioned that multi-drug resistant TB is a really big issue. So when people do develop active TB disease, we have a certain range of antibiotics that we can use, but we're seeing globally resistance develop. So you have multi-drug resistant or extensively drug resistant TB. So identifying new therapeutics. Don't get me started, because I could talk for hours on this. But I will just quickly say, as an example, right, where things blossom and explode in different directions. When I was in med school, I had the opportunity to do some work with some elders in Eskasoni in Cape Breton, and was introduced to medicinal plants that were used to treat TB, and had the opportunity then to work with Tim Lee at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Pierre Taschereau with the Department of Pharmacology, later Dennis Kunimoto at the University of Alberta, but then locally in St. John, people like Chris Gray and John Johnson, who were profs at UMB, doing medicinal plant research and actually being able to identify, here are molecules locally growing in our plants that have activity against TB. So again, it just grows and blossoms out into so many different directions. So epidemiology, diagnostics, therapeutics. But lastly, I think it's also trying to overcome the stigma so that people will, I think, be able to openly discuss and think about seeking screening and treatment. So there's a whole range of things. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much.
And Eileen, I want to jump in really briefly for 30 seconds and echo what Duncan's been saying. And I think it demonstrates how sometimes you look at the DALMED NB research program and you think, oh, this is just a small lab with 3 or 4 PIs there and they're doing this. But the connections, the support, so your footprint in the lab, Duncan, is pretty small, but it links out to this greater community program that is then connected across the country and the world to other researchers. And you gave a great example of the abstractor paper where you had names from your lab, from your clinical work with Horizon, from public health physicians on there, with world experts all leading this research. And I think to have that here in New Brunswick, I think we have to protect it because it's something special. And yes, it's small, but the connections that come from that to Horizon UNB, to our other partners, they're incredible. And they can only help us as we move forward.
Thanks very much for that. So that's a good place for us to stop. I'm sure the speakers will be around if you have any other burning questions. And if you had questions later, you can always contact the advancement team and we can connect people. So what I heard today, I always try to think of a couple of things to remember: compassion, connection, communication, and innovation. And that from this nucleus, we are growing many international connections. So thank you. So let's take a moment here and thank all of our speakers one last time for their great presentations. And it's time for us to wrap up and get everyone back to their busy day. So the great news is, even though you came out early, you still have time for a full day's work wherever you are. I'd like to remind everyone of the opportunity to support medical research at DMMB on this Giving Tuesday by using the form in your program, or ask any of the staff here today. So there's a form, it's about this big in your program, that you can support medical research. You might take it today, but you might also think about it for later. We're always happy to hear from you. Thanks again, with deep sincerity, to our sponsors, our gold sponsor, Shanax, our silver sponsors, Dalhousie's Department of Medicine, and our bronze sponsors, Research NB, Envision St. John, and the New Brunswick Medical Society. Thanks to all of you as well. I'm really pleased to see the turnout and your presence and support today. Donors, as we've said, are crucial to the health research. You are part of the research team. And you really help us directly address some of these biggest regional challenges, but also, as you've seen, global and international challenges. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming. And a big shout out to the people at the Delta and for Advancement who put a lot of work into these events. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.